Imagine dropping your child off at preschool. A few weeks later, police tell you that teachers may have abused dozens of children. Then the accusations grow. Teachers flying through the air, secret tunnels, satanic rituals, impossible things happening inside an ordinary preschool. This isn't fiction. In 1983, a mother in Manhattan Beach, California, told police her son had been abused at preschool. But the accusation did not stop there. And somehow, those claims became one of the most infamous criminal cases in American history. By the end, hundreds of children had been named as possible victims. The investigation lasted 7 years. It produced zero convictions. And the most sensational allegations were never substantiated. So here's the question most people don't stop to ask. How does one accusation, one that eventually included flying teachers, hidden tunnels, and impossible events, become something police, prosecutors, parents, therapists, journalists, and an entire country were willing to take seriously? Because the answer isn't simply that people were gullible. That's too easy. The better question is, what kind of fear makes evidence stop working? Because the Satanic Panic was never really about Satanism, it was about children. More specifically, it was about the idea that children were in danger from hidden, organized, unspeakable threats. And once the idea took hold, the normal rules of evidence started to bend. Fear didn't need proof, fear needed a story. And the story became powerful enough to make doubt feel dangerous. The case began with Judy Johnson, whose son attended McMartin Preschool. Her son was having painful bowel movements. That was the medical concern at the center of the first allegation. Johnson initially accused her estranged husband of abuse. She later accused Ray Buckey, a teacher at McMartin Preschool. From there, the case expanded. Police mailed a letter to around 200 parents. And this is one of the most important moments of the entire story. The letter didn't simply announce there was an investigation, it listed specific acts parents should ask their children about. It suggested crimes that might have occurred, and it instructed parents not to discuss the investigation outside their immediate family. Think about what that does. The letter gave parents vivid images to look for. Then it limited the kind of conversations that might have challenged those ideas. No comparing notes, no asking another parent, did your child say this on their own? No shared reality check. Just frightened parents trying to determine whether something unimaginable had happened to their children. That's how fear becomes a closed loop. The investigation was then handed to Children's Institute International, where children were interviewed using methods that later came under heavy criticism. Leading questions, repeated questioning, rewards for confirming abuse, suggestions that other children had already disclosed things. When children denied abuse, the questioning often continued. When children gave answers that matched the investigators' expectations, those answers were treated as evidence. And this matters because children aren't tiny adults. Memory isn't a video recording, especially in young children. Research has shown that repeated questioning, suggestion, and social pressure can influence what children remember, report, or eventually come to believe happened. A clinical psychologist who later reviewed the interview tapes testified that many of the children's statements appeared to be shaped by the interview process rather than simply volunteered. That doesn't mean every adult involved had bad intentions. It means the process itself became contaminated. And once the process is contaminated, the evidence it produces has to be viewed with caution. By spring of 1984, the allegations had exploded. Hundreds of children were identified as potential victims. The stories became increasingly elaborate. Satanic rituals, animal sacrifice, secret tunnels, hot air balloon rides. Investigators searched beneath the preschool. They found no credible physical evidence supporting the sensational claims. But McMartin wasn't unique. Similar cases appeared across the country. Kern County, We Care Nursery, Little Rascals, Bell Acres. The details changed. The pattern did not. Children were interviewed repeatedly. The allegations became more extraordinary. Physical evidence remained absent. Yet the panic continued to spread because by then the story had become larger than the facts. This may be the most dangerous mechanism of all. The Satanic Panic created a threat that was everywhere and nowhere, a hidden network operating behind friendly faces, inside trusted institutions. And when a threat is invisible, disproving it becomes incredibly difficult. If investigators found no evidence, perhaps the cult had hidden it. If there were no tunnels, perhaps they had concealed them. If children denied abuse, perhaps they were too traumatized to remember. Every failed search became evidence that the conspiracy was simply better hidden. That's the trap. Once you're inside that way of thinking, normal standards of proof begin to fail. You can't prove the threat exists because it's hidden. You can't prove it doesn't exist because hiding is treated as part of the threat. The accusation becomes almost impossible to falsify. And when an accusation can't be tested, it stops functioning like evidence. It starts functioning like belief. Between 1983 and 1990, daycare workers across the country were charged in cases influenced by this panic. Some were convicted, many convictions were later overturned. The McMartin case alone lasted 7 years and cost millions of dollars. Ray Buckey spent years in jail awaiting trial before ultimately not being convicted. And this is where we need to be very careful. The lesson isn't that child abuse is imaginary. It isn't. Children are abused. Institutions can fail them. The lesson is that genuine concern can become moral panic when fear becomes untouchable. Because once protecting children becomes the only acceptable frame, asking for evidence can start to feel like indifference. That's what makes this mechanism so powerful. In 1972, sociologist Stanley Cohen published Folk Devils and Moral Panics. He wasn't studying satanic ritual abuse. He was studying why societies repeatedly fall into periods of exaggerated fear and perceived threats. He noticed a pattern. A group becomes defined as a threat. The media amplifies the threat. Experts explain it. Authorities respond. Only later does society ask whether the threat or the response was actually proportional to the evidence. The Satanic Panic followed that pattern remarkably closely. The folk devil was daycare workers. The moral shield was protecting children. The invisible threat was satanic ritual abuse. The media amplified it. Experts validated it. Authorities acted on it. And by the time the evidence was seriously questioned, lives had already been changed forever. Looking back today, it's easy to laugh at the Satanic Panic. Flying teachers, secret tunnels, hot air balloon abductions. It sounds absurd, but the people living through it didn't experience it that way. Parents believed they were protecting their children. Police believed they were investigating a hidden evil. Prosecutors believed they were pursuing justice. Journalists believed they were exposing a dangerous threat. That's what makes moral panics so dangerous. They rarely feel like a panic from the inside. They feel like responsibility. They feel like protection. They feel like common sense. The lesson of the Satanic Panic isn't that people in the 1980s were uniquely gullible. It's that protecting children is one of the most powerful moral instincts human beings have. And because it's so powerful, it can sometimes short circuit skepticism. It can make evidence feel secondary. It can make doubt feel immoral. And once that happens, innocent people can suffer for crimes that never occurred. That's why understanding the Satanic Panic still matters. Not because we're likely to see the exact same accusations again, but because the mechanisms still exist. The structure is still intact. The folk devil changes. The playbook doesn't. History matters, not because it tells us who to fear, because it teaches us what fear can do to us. Y'all be well, and I'll see you on the next one.